I am joined today by Katie McIntyre. Katie is a high performance coach with CareerSprout, where she's been helping hundreds of folks land $200,000 to $500,000 job offers from companies they admire, doing work they actually enjoy. Katie, thank you so much for being in my orbit and for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me. Hopefully we can help some people today.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And that's what I want to talk about is the job search process. Before we do though, I would love for you to share your absolutely magnificent wild journey in your 20s of holding down 8 full-time jobs, making over $1 million a year. How did you do it and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I will start by saying it was not intentional. There was a lot of luck involved, and there was a lot of me just being too stupid to know how the world worked that worked to my advantage. So I'm going to start by saying that I do not recommend my path to anyone whatsoever. So back in the day when I first started, somebody introduced me to entrepreneurship. No, I had no idea. I didn't even know what the word meant when I first heard about it. And I thought being a 1099 contractor, I thought that those were the jobs that were meant for entrepreneurs. And that was just an understood thing. Um, W-2 was employees, 1099 was entrepreneurs. So I just kept getting all of these 1099 contracts, helping folks with, it started off as marketing, then it was helping their salespeople convert, then it was overseeing the operation so that they could handle, the influx of things. And so each client just kept adding on more and more work. And I just thought everybody knew, yeah, I have multiple clients. It wasn't until I just went to somebody and I was like, hey, one of my clients is testing this and it's working really well. I think it'll work for you guys too. And his face dropped. He's like, what are you talking about? Your other client? And I froze. I was like, oh no, was I not allowed to have other clients? I had no idea, no concept of it. And I was like, I actually have 7 other clients right now. And he was awesome. He was one of my first mentors. And he was like, Katie, you need to start a high performance company. Like the fact that you can do all of this at once. Again, I just had no idea. I just thought everybody did it. And turns out I enjoyed building systems and being a nerd and living in spreadsheets and all of that stuff. And so it was, yeah, just kind of being too dumb to know any better that I thought that's what everybody did if they wanted to be an entrepreneur. And that's how it happened.
That's wild. So you have taken then those systems and you've applied this to your coaching practice today. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the founder of CareerSprout, I first met him he was a client. He was like, hey, I have this system. It's really great, but I don't want to miss out on my kids' lives. Like I would love to still be able to help people, but still be a good husband, be a good dad. That's really important to me. And so when I looked at his system, it was funny. Exactly what he was teaching folks on how to get jobs. That was the exact process that I used to get what I called clients, AKA full-time jobs that I didn't realize that I had. And so it was awesome. We were able to essentially take his method, copy and paste my systems. And now, yeah, it's pretty much foolproof. Like we know with 100% certainty, if somebody has followed the systems, followed the steps, they work every time. If you implement them 100% of the way there, it's going to work every time.
The very foundation of a job search often has to be in introspection, right? You have to know what it is you're going after. And I am curious because you've dealt with so many people, you've coached hundreds. Do you think people know what they want and don't feel worthy of it? Or do you think people do not take the time to do enough introspection and therefore they don't know what they want?
It's interesting. I think it depends on the person. Before we ever start with a client, before we start the job search, we always do something called a career audit. And this is one of my all-time favorite aspects of the program because to your point, it's like, okay, do you know what you want and you're a little bit afraid of it? Or have you not thought about this? Have you always had a job kind of fall into your lap? That happens a lot with folks that we work with, where this is their first time really actively on a job search. And so I think it totally depends on the person, but an exercise, I know you don't want to go too tactical yet, but a really simple exercise to kind of find out which bucket you fall into is asking yourself, if I was talking to me 5 years from now, like who would I want that person to be? Who would I want to be talking to? And what advice would that person give me? And I think we all know deep in our gut exactly who that person is, exactly what that person would sound like. And when you do that little thought exercise, it doesn't really matter if it's because you're afraid, or it doesn't matter if you've never thought about it before. It's a really simple way for you to just kind of get out of your own head and be like, okay, this is what I actually want. Now, do I think I can get there? And then that's where it depends on your answer there.
Yeah, no, that's a great exercise. I've done a lot of that, like journaling a future version of me so that I walk through what my life would be like. And a lot of it is, I think we don't tap in enough to our imagination. We have an
Yeah.
incredible one, but we kind of stifle that. Do you do you think there's a difference before we kind of again get into that tactical nature of a job search, but do you think there's a difference between a job and a career, or is it just semantics? They're synonyms to each other. I'm curious. Is there a distinction?
Yeah, we use them slightly differently. So we're really big believers that there's no such thing as a dream job, because who you are at the moment you get that job is kind of like a starting line. And you're probably going to be different in 90 days, in 12 months, in 5 years. So even if it maybe had the idea of a dream job at the beginning, it's like, well, as you change, your dreams likely are going to evolve and adapt as well. So we think it is possible to have what we call a career nirvana, where it's like you have this career path, that career path is always supporting the best version of you. So we always start there. It's a little bit backwards, I think, from what most people think about it, where we want to look at, if we were talking to you, it'd be, hey, Lauren is up here. What does Lauren want as a human being, first and foremost? And then let's make sure that the career supports that. And what that job looks like in each season of your life is going to be slightly different. If we have people that they come to us and they're having their first baby, well, you're about to be in a very different season of life. Your job should probably look a little bit different than it did when you were 24 and you were just learning everything for the first time. Or if you're, 44 and you're trying to make that jump into, a $300,000 role into leadership or whatever the case may be, that job will look slightly different. And then the career that you're building, that's really where you can take that big picture and always do that pulse check to say, okay, is this actually supporting my lifestyle? Or am I entering a new season now where something's got to change here?
I really appreciate that you start with somebody's personal aspirations and their lifestyle, because I do think so many shoehorn their lifestyle into their career, so that I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble, is that they put a lot of their personal aspirations on the back burner to achieve a career, but you are flipping that on its head. Do you see, as a result, again, you mentioned a lot of people kind of stumble in, kind of the front door of these really great opportunities. Why do you think it is that we're not taught to carve out a life plan and then make a career path that works for that? Is it because, of the way schools or the way, I don't know, corporate America is structured? Why are we so inverted?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know that I really know why. I think the why is slightly different for every person. Like, I'm a nerd through and through. Like, if I had more time, I would be going and getting a PhD for fun. Like, that lights me up. And so, like, a lot of people say the school system failed them or this or that. Like, I think, like, and I'll even look at myself and I have two older brothers. It's like we all went to the exact same schools. They didn't love school the way I loved school. They were not nerds. They did not, get the same things out of it. And so I don't know that it's a school system to blame. I don't know that it's a structure to blame. I think we're just at a really cool place in history right now, quite frankly, where this is the first time everybody, at least in the US, there's a lot of opportunity to access information and to self teach yourself. And so I think when you have that overload of information, there's a lot there's a lot of variables that don't even make sense. At least for me, I'm not smart enough to try to calculate all those variables of like what could be causing all of the different things. I like to think like, okay, well, if you're here and you are having a moment in life, you're like, okay, I'm aware of the fact that I haven't been intentional up to this point. Awesome. It happened now. Doesn't matter if you're 12, doesn't matter if you're 24, if you're 42, 58, I don't care what the number is. It's happening now. And you have so much life still ahead of you to now do something about it. So I don't really know what caused it. I do think about that a lot, but I don't know that it really matters, or I don't think it serves people to figure out the answer to that. Whereas the answer to, okay, well, what can I do about it now that I realize it? Well, now that's something I can get really excited about, because now that's something you have control over.
At the beginning of the search, we talked about introspection. Let's talk about resumes. Is
Yep.
the resume here to stay, or is it going the way of the dodo? And I would love to dive into some of the mishaps people make with their resume. But before we do, is it here to stay?
Yeah. I mean, I think some form or fashion of it is. It's just marketing collateral at the end of the day. So I think some form of the resume will always be here. And just knowing, well, that's my short answer. Yes, I think it's here to stay in some form.
Okay. If you could imagine a better form of it, what do you think it would look like? I don't know if you have imagined. I've heard people talk about video resumes where forget the written word, it's actually you on a video camera talking about your strengths and your accomplishments. What have you imagined, if you have, about a better version?
We have a philosophy, or we have a process around what I'm going to combine two things. It's resume and outreach. So I think the resume, it's like that is going to appease the systems that are in place now. When recruiters and hiring managers are scanning, make sure you have the keywords that they're looking for, the responsibilities that show that you can actually do the job, and then quantifiable accomplishments, how you were able to move the needle for your company, for your team. I think knowing that and being able to articulate and show that is always going to stay. In what medium, I'm not really sure. The resume as it exists right now converts best case 2%. Usually it's 0.5 to 2%. So if you're applying and you're trying to get one response, that means you need to apply to 50 to 200 jobs for one response. That's a lot. That's obviously not a super efficient method. Obviously there's easy apply now, so it doesn't take that long either. What we prefer to do, or where we focus our attention, our clients will write one resume for them. That's it. It's just one resume, one LinkedIn profile. They match each other. And then we use something called outreach. And that's where I think things are going, where it's custom and targeted to the individual at the company that has an opportunity that you're excited about. Before I go into that, just to put it into perspective, the resume best case scenario is 2% conversion. Our clients, our outreach that we do, we won't even troubleshoot unless it drops below 20%. So that means for every 100 people you're reaching out to, you should be hearing back from at least 20 of them. If it's below that, we've got to troubleshoot. Usually it's well above that. And so what that looks like, and where I think resumes are going, to your point, is it's really targeted. I saw you're looking for this specific aspect of the job. Over the last X years, I've done 1, 2, 3. And those 1, 2, 3 bullet points are the quantifiable, they include quantifiable results from when you were doing those things, just to demonstrate, hey, I've been there, done that, and I actually really enjoy doing this. Do you think it makes sense to have a conversation? That, I think, is where things are going. If you can really get targeted, and I think AI and all of that, I'm not, again, smart enough to like make a real hypothesis on that, but my gut would be it's only going to help you do that better, and it's going to help more people do that better, and it's going to take and reduce, hopefully, some of that 1,000 applicants for one job and only 300 of them are actually qualified, and then right, like whittling it down. I do think there's a really good opportunity for AI to help in that, but I think that's where it's going. It's just customization.
I talk to a lot of people about networking because I think that, especially in the market we're in right now, to your point, you can't just keep putting resumes out into the void and hoping and crossing your fingers that you'll hear back, because you might be waiting a very, very long time, as
Yeah.
evidenced by how many people are still looking. And I'm shocked at time and time again how few people have thought to leverage LinkedIn or leverage their immediate network to actually go out and proactively put themselves out there, as opposed to being more passive and hitting easy apply. I don't know if it's because networking has such a distasteful kind of air around it. How do
Yep.
you help people overcome that anxiety or that phobia around networking? Now you're calling it outreach, and I like that. It has a little bit less of that
Yeah.
cringeworthy tone to it. How do you help people overcome that? Why do you think people don't immediately think, "Oh, this makes a lot." It's very commonsensical when you explain it.
Yeah. So that is part of the reason why we call it outreach instead of networking, is because people already have all of these feelings in and around the word networking, whereas outreach, and this is actually a really big secret to the job search as a whole, is the language that you associate with different aspects of it. If you're saying, oh, I was just rejected again, it's like, that hurts. Rejection hurts. And that is something that our brains are wired to try to avoid at all costs. And I think that's why most people don't jump right to networking or outreach, whatever you want to call it, is because even if you look at that stats, and sometimes we have to reorient our clients even where we make them track we can't make them do anything. We strongly recommend that they track everything. And that number that I just shared, 20% conversion rate, people will hear that and they're like, heck yeah, that's incredible. But they forget that's an 80% failure rate. So that means if you're reaching out to 10 people, 8 of them are ignoring you or rejecting you on the spot immediately. But that's okay. You only need 2 of them. So like as a general rule, a client can get through their job search process. It usually takes, on average, there's outliers to this, between 100 to 1,000 connect requests or first messages going out. They have accepted a job somewhere in that region. And I think the reason why most people avoid that 100 to 1,000 is because that means that 20 to 800 or 80 to 800 of them are not going to respond or going to reject them. And most people can't handle that, or they don't have a feedback loop to know, okay, I'm improving as I go. Like, you'd be kind of crazy to get 80 no's in a row and just be like, I want to keep going. That feels great. Like, you need some added proof that this is actually going to work. Whereas 80 auto rejections, it's like, well, I just clicked a button. That's not that big of a deal. So I think that's why most people avoid it, is it feels like there's a lot more risk. It feels like there's a lot more rejection, even though the reality is it isn't.
A big part of this is feedback. You mentioned the feedback loop. So the whole time that your clients are going through the process, you're providing them with feedback, right? Feedback on their resume, feedback on their presentation, feedback on their outreach, feedback from their interviews, and so on and so forth. I think that's a reason why I started Cupalo, is because I felt like there was this massive void in the market. And I don't think AI is going to solve that. In a lot of ways, it's human to human. And there's a lot of really great tools out there, but I would love to know about how you provide feedback, like through the interview process, because you're not the
Yeah.
actual hiring leader. How do you help coach people through the beginning of an interview, and also dealing with the rejection following, so that they don't lose heart and they go in feeling really armed with the tools they need in their toolbox to do well?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we try to establish early on, this is well before anybody even goes into the interview, is recognizing that job search skills are different than your career skills. Even if you're in sales, even if you're in marketing, when you are going through a job search, it is really easy for you to start questioning whether or not you can do your job. If 4 people in a row tell you, nah, not a good fit, it could be for so many reasons that have nothing to do with you. It's really easy to start thinking like, did I get lucky? Was it just because Mark in accounting really liked me that I got promoted? What the heck is happening right now? And it's really easy for that to just cripple you. So to be frank, a lot of what we're doing with clients is reminding them, and we have systems in place so that they're reminding themselves, not daily, not hourly, but multiple times throughout every minute of every day, reminding themselves of what they are good at and what they are currently working on. And so the way we insert feedback loops into interviews is a couple things. One, we have trainings that they'll watch on repeat. So that's just starting to like learn by osmosis. It starts sinking in. They hear the tonality of how you ask questions. They hear the tonality of how you respond to things. But then before every interview, one of our coaches will prep them. And so we'll go through and we'll either walk through questions they should be asking based on who the hiring or who they're speaking with, or we'll go through practice responses with them. And it's on the spot. It's like, say this. It's like, okay, do you hear how that sounded versus if you did it this way? What happened if you do it this way? And so they're getting practice reps in. A lot of people, they don't get any practice reps in. It's like game day going to the interview and they only have one maybe every week or every other week. And it should be terrifying if that's what you're doing. But when you have all of those practice reps and you've done it all, by the time you show up to the interviews, it actually just feels like a conversation. And I think this is maybe something that will help a lot of folks out there. Usually, since most of our clients are targeting $200,000 to $500,000 plus jobs, we know they can do they have proof that they can do the job. Like, that's not in question. And so what happens is they go to the interview and they try so hard to be perfect. They try so hard to know everything. And I don't know if anybody has ever gone to school with a know-it-all that raises their hand and has the answer for everything. But as a general rule, as humans, we do not like those people. They make us feel dumb. They make us feel inferior. They make us feel like we got nothing to offer. But that's how people actually show up into interviews. And they're like, I don't understand why they didn't like me. It's like, because you seem like a know-it-all. Nobody likes working with a know-it-all. You didn't ask a single question to them. You were perfect. And that's not actually what our aim is. And so this is usually something that we see, like, as soon as our clients realize this, it's like, oh, it's like a weight vest just got lifted off of them, where the goal is to be authentic, to be really able to clearly articulate what you've actually done, but then ask them questions about who you're working with, what the culture is like, what the problems are that they're trying to solve. And if you're asking questions about that, coming in like a consultant, and they're saying like, we're struggling. I'll give you an example of, actually, it was a program manager I was interviewing for a role at Google, and they were like, you know what? Right now, what's just happening is I'm working on this, so-and-so is working on this, and it was a panel, and it was all these people saying like what was wrong. They're like, we just need somebody that can organize, like, and make sure that nothing's falling through the cracks. That was really all they needed. And the candidate just went, oh my gosh. So like, it sounds like you just need somebody to herd cats. I am a cat herder. That is what I love to do, right? She was able to position herself in that way. And you could see she genuinely loved it. She lit up. She's like, oh, can I tell you about this one time? And she went into an example that was so relevant to them. She's like, I don't know if you guys have tried this yet, but we just implemented this really simple thing, XYZ, and it resulted in this. And I learned so much from that process. And so now it's not this perfect. It was like, hey, we had this same problem and we were struggling with it. And then this awesome thing happened that we were able to figure it out. And so now she doesn't act like a know-it-all. It's like, oh, I've been there, done that, struggled with that exact thing that you guys are banging your head against the wall. I was banging my head against the wall for a month until we figured this out. So now nobody feels stupid. Now nobody feels inadequate. It's like, oh, that's such a great idea. And now you're the solution to their problems without having to brag about anything, without having to, make yourself look better than it is. Like, being vulnerable and being like, we struggled with that big time before we figured it out. That's usually the key to really, the feedback that we're usually giving after interviews and before interviews is exactly that. Less polished, not a textbook answer. How would you talk about this if you were catching up with an old friend and, talking about what you were able to do? That is the game changer for folks.
Well, I am so glad you're providing that type of coaching, because I talk to a lot of people within this type of realm, and I'm amazed at how few ask questions. It's I don't know if it's a lack of curiosity, or, to your point, I think you hit on this. It's, you get to a certain point in your career, you do know a lot, and you come across like a know-it-all, and it causes you to shut down and go, ugh. But every person I've ever talked to that has a lot of questions is it immediately makes you want to talk with them more because they're showing interest. So I was curious about that program manager who interviewed in front of Google. So is she relaying her interview to you and you're providing feedback, or have you practiced so much? Is there a recording? Like, how do you know about the cats herding? That's great. How did you know about that? Is that a relayed piece of information from her, or?
Yeah, so it depends on a couple things. If people can record their interviews, that's always preferred. So like, a lot of folks now, they'll just upload. There's a couple of main ones out there like Otter.ai, Fathom. There's these different call recording things where you can just ask, be like, hey, instead of me having to take notes, do you mind if I just have my transcriber so that I have a summary afterwards? Most interviewers are totally fine with that. And so now what happens, don't go and blast it on YouTube. Like, this is my caveat. Check with a lawyer, check with your state. Like, never take legal advice from me. I am not a lawyer. But when you're able to do that, now we've got the transcript and we hear the audio. So oftentimes, and we'll actually review the first 5 or so full interviews that folks go on with a recruiter, hiring manager, the executive cultural fit, the cross-functional peer, the panel, the case study, whatever they're, dealing with. And so we get to actually hear the feedback of like, okay, we prepped for this and we heard you on the prep and then you showed up in this way. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Either way, it's a learning that now when we hear it in the, we call it a retrospective, or sometimes they'll just listen to it themselves and do like a self-reflection. Now they know exactly what to work on, again, because they've gone through so many preps. It would be the equivalent of one of our coaches. Actually, she was the one that created the system for us. I think she was learning how to surf and she was really struggling. She couldn't stand up on the board, didn't even know what it would look like to be good standing up on the board. And so she got a coach and he just filmed her. This was literally, it was like she'd been trying. And as soon as he filmed her and she'd come in, they would watch the recording. He's like, you see how your foot was here instead of there? Change that. Did it again. Didn't get up again, but came back. You see how your hand was here instead of there? Change that. What happens when you have somebody who knows what good looks like, who knows what good sounds like? It's very easy to just make those little tiny tweaks. And then she was standing up on the surfboard. Same thing in interviews.
That's awesome. I think you've said so many good things, but I can't help but reemphasize how important it is what you said about interviewing is the job search process is a whole other skill set. So you might be totally gangbusters at the role that you've held for the last 15 years, but now you're in an entirely different role searching for a job and you don't have the muscles. So how can you show up to game day and be expected to totally knock it out of the park? So thank you for saying that, because I do think that is something that does not get enough attention. And I haven't even really thought of it that way. It makes so much sense. The final, and I imagine sort of process that you're really doing a lot of hand holding through is, I imagine, the salary negotiation process, if I'm correct. What do you find are some tips, tricks, things people should be thinking about when it comes to approaching a negotiation process?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what's interesting is if you've done it all right up until this point, the negotiation is actually the easiest, even though I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, what is she talking about? That's the worst part of it. So as a general rule, and I think there's a couple of principles that are really important for folks to keep in mind. The negotiation doesn't start when they give you the offer. The negotiation has started. Oftentimes the recruiter will say, hey, what are your salary expectations? It's starting then. And so we're a really big fan. This is a tactical thing that people can use, where if a recruiter or anybody asks you about your salary expectations, you can just share with them and make it authentic to you. Salary is actually not my number one motivator. I'm far more interested in joining a team where I can contribute, make an impact, continue to learn, really work around great people. That said, full transparency, the companies that I'm interviewing with right now are offering between X and Y. And that's a range I'm comfortable with. I'm curious, what's the budget for this role, right? And so that's a really simple response where you're not taking yourself out of negotiation. You're making sure, and you've done your research, the X and Y. It shouldn't be some number that you pulled out of, thin air. That's done based on research, based on the companies you're interviewing for, the role, your seniority, your experience, the industry, all of that. And so it started then. And then every single time you're in an interview, it's your opportunity to uncover value. It's your opportunity to increase your value to the company. So then by the time, one of two things will happen by the time our clients get an offer, they have either already maxed out and given them exactly what they wanted, and sometimes even more than what they wanted. And awesome. No negotiation. You don't negotiate for negotiation's sake. When that happens, it's awesome. This looks great. And you accept it. That's phenomenal. That's always what our goal is. In this market, that is not as common. And so what we'll do is as soon as they get the offer, it's usually a verbal offer first. And we never accept it on the spot again, unless they go so above and beyond. You're like, there's nothing I could add to this. So what we coach them on is as soon as they get the verbal offer, it's just showing gratitude. Even if it's a lowball offer, I don't care. If it's lowball, if it's awful, if it's abysmal, it's still gratitude. This is not the end all be all. So let's say you're targeting, actually, I'll give you an example that actually just happened. This guy really wanted to be at least 200 and their top of their range only went to 180. And so they offered him 178. It was like right at the top, or 178. It was something at the top, but not a round number. And so he said, "Thank you so much. I so appreciate this. Would you mind sending the offer along with the benefits over via email so I can take a look and get back with any questions? I'm so excited about the opportunity to work together." And now it's like, yeah, absolutely. They send it back. We look at it, we study it, and we don't just look at the base comp. There are so many other things about your comp package that can make or break it as being a good offer for you. And again, you, not your neighbor, not your brother, what you actually care about. Your brother may want to go into the office every day of the week. You may care about remote. You could negotiate remote work. That's going to be a better offer for you than it would your brother or your neighbor or whoever. And so when we got this offer back, what we did was we looked at it and we're like, you know what? All of the things listed on here are actually, I think it was a senior product manager position. The responsibilities that they had listed out were actually principal level. So that was really important for him for his growth. So that was one of the aspects that we negotiated. Hey, are we able to do principal? And then again, looking at the industry, looking at the job, looking at the impact that this person would make. It's like, okay, comparable salary, what market is actually offering for this is actually closer to 200, 220, 230 in some cases. So let's see if we can bump that up as well. And then the other thing was the stock equity options. So this guy went from getting an offer of like 180, and I forget what the shares were, where we just simply asked, hey, would you be willing, and we've got a framework, and I'm more than happy. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, I actually just have it like pinned to the top of my profile for anybody who needs the exact email that we use. You can just take it. And we always offer 3 options because we're looking for a win-win. And so we sent it back with 3 options of different salary options, different equity options, the title options. And the company was able to pick and choose from what they were able to do. Where it's like, sometimes you can only go so high on stock. Sometimes you can only go so high on base. Sometimes you don't have wiggle room on the title, whatever the case may be. And they came back and he ended up getting 220 in base, over 300 in total comp, the title that he wanted to set him up for success. And it was literally just by asking for it, again, politely in a strategic way where he was showing options, he was showing that it was a win-win solution. But that's really as simple as it gets. When you've uncovered that value, done your research, you can simply ask. And so long as it's reasonable, and so long as you've shown that gratitude, so long as you've shown that like you're excited about the opportunity, if there's wiggle room, you'll usually get it. Worst thing that happens is they say no, unless, again, if he came in, he was like, hey, I'm not accepting anything under 400,000 in base. It's like, they're probably going to rescind because it's like, if you can go get that someplace else, you should go someplace else because we're never going to be able to come up to that. So there's an art and a science to it, making sure you're not asking for too much, making sure it's backed by research and the value that you can actually provide.
That's so great that you encourage people to be grateful regardless of what it is. I think that sets people up to be in a better headspace when they are crafting a response and providing options, and also for the company to be the recipient of that gratitude and feel like, because it is a lot of work for them to put an offer together, even if it isn't the ideal one right away. So
Yep.
I think that's great. In light of the market we're in, because you brought up the market, I would love to talk to you about how you feel. This is my second to last question today. How do you feel about the market right now? From my perspective, it seems there's a lot of people in tech looking, and there's less opportunities for them than there have been historically. How are you feeling about 2024? What do you think? What are you projecting with your crystal ball for the latter half of this year?
I am not smart enough to make projections on that. I do think that this is one of the worst job markets just historically that we've had in a really long time. Um, and I think this is the one that it's become most clear that what is most important today is relationships and human connections. It's too easy to get a auto messenger bot to message 20,000 people and hope for a 2% conversion rate and, move forward with those 2%. All of those things, because they're so easy and because so many people are using them, your ability to build really authentic, strong relationships where you're adding value to people, I think that is what's going to make or break the individual's job search. And there's a ton of ways you can do that. We always say we don't have an ego big enough to think that our way is the only way that works. But I think if you're focused on what you can control instead of what the market is, focused on having really strong or really meaningful conversations with folks who work at companies you admire, who are in positions to hire, who can introduce you. I think when you have those skills and you're consistently nurturing those relationships, even when you don't, or I should say, especially when you don't need anything, I don't think you ever have to worry about the job market. Like, we have folks, normally the second time somebody goes through our program, it's pretty rare for it to take them more than 30 days to find a job that they're excited about, because they have spent the last X years nurturing the relationships that they first planted the seeds the first time they went through the program.
That's great. And I appreciate that, I think that the world is abundant. I think it's easy to buy into a scarce mindset and get freaked out, and you write the narrative, there's nothing out there, so you don't
Yep.
begin. But I do think that it's so much more bucket filling when you go through it with the idea of connecting with awesome human beings throughout the process. I mean, it just feels like life is worth living and the job search is far more meaningful. My last question for you today, you touched on about if you had more time, you'd probably nerd out and go get a PhD. So is this one of those examples of a don't look at a cobbler's shoes? You provide, this high performance career coaching for so many people. Do you
Yep.
feel like it's hard to coach yourself?
Oh, yes. So I still am, I should clarify that. I would love to just like go sit in a classroom and learn and absorb. Um, I'm not doing that currently because I think that's a lot of theoretical. That's just stuff that's not necessarily helpful to clients. But I have a coach for every aspect of my life. I have a fitness coach, I have a business coach, I have like mentors for spiritual, mental health, like everything. And so I very much invest, and I um, am not disciplined. I wish I was. Maybe one day I will be. I'm not disciplined enough to hold myself 100% accountable across the board for everything. So I very much, as soon as I realize that I have a deficit, a skill deficit, or I'm slipping on something, immediately there's a coach in that arena just to see things that I'm not seeing, see things if there's something doing damage. I want to fix that up as quickly as possible. And I like to shortcut that as much as possible, finding somebody who does that or who has done that for themselves, and just say, hey, help me out. Where do I be like the surfboard? Where does my hand go? Where does my foot go? Let's get me there as soon as possible.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. Like I said, I think it's funny how most of us don't cut our own hair or paint our fingernails, but we won't go and seek guidance and shepherding through these really, really critical things in our life that would totally change our life for the better if we could talk to somebody who'd been
Yeah.
there, done that, and has kicked ass in a big way. So I think it's very clear you do eat your own dog food, you go get help, you help a lot of people through this process. And thank you so much for everything you shared today, Katie. I mean, from, like I said, more of those tactical job searching components that are just here to stay for the time being, to the ones that I don't think people often realize this is a whole other skill set, and you can get a lot of benefit through adopting that new mindset and connecting with great people like yourself along the way to get help should they get stuck. So thank you for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations and for all these fabulous insights.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And yeah, if there's anybody who needs help, just let us know.